Hey everyone, in this video, we are going to talk about the cerebral cortex. So in our last video, we introduced the brain, talked about some main divisions and key structures, and I told you guys I would go ahead and talk about the cerebral cortex in a separate video because there's a lot to it. The cerebral cortex is the most prominent part of our brain, and we have two hemispheres, the left and the right hemispheres, and those hemispheres communicate with each other through the corpus callosum and the anterior commissure. Let me blow up this picture here real quick. So you can see we've got the left and right hemispheres here, and these hemispheres are communicating, and the red in this image indicates the corpus callosum. So that's how these two hemispheres are communicating with one another. Let's talk about the different lobes that are associated with the cerebral cortex. Let's start with the occipital lobe, which is back here in purple. The occipital lobe is associated with visual information. So it's actually connecting to our visual information here through the eyeballs. The parietal lobe, which is indicated here in yellow, is associated with sense of touch and spatial awareness. And then here we have our temporal lobe, which is indicated in a teal or green color. The temporal lobe is associated with audition, language, memory, and emotions. And then we have our frontal lobe here in red. And our frontal lobe is also associated with language, planning, memory, reasoning, problem solving, and impulse control. So as you can see, some of the functions that these lobes have may overlap. So the temporal lobe is associated with language, and so is the frontal lobe. So I wanted to talk a little bit specifically about sensory and motor information in relation to the cerebral cortex. The text talks about within the parietal lobe that we have the postcentral gyrus. And then in the frontal lobe, we have the precentral gyrus. The postcentral gyrus is also known as the primary somatosensory cortex. The postcentral gyrus has four bands that are parallel to the central sulcus. Two of those receive light touch information. One receives deep pressure information, so kind of deeper tissue information, and one is a combination. And the precentral gyrus, or the primary motor cortex, is associated with different body parts. Each location of that gyrus regulates movement in a different body part. So we have a really neat diagram or figure here from our text. It's actually on page 85 that visually explains that for us. So here's that primary motor cortex right here, and then the primary somatosensory cortex. And then we've got the visuals here that basically tell us kind of what that gyrus is doing. So the postcentral gyrus, which is the somatosensory cortex, you can kind of see here that different parts of that gyrus are associated with different sensory information for different body parts. And same thing for the precentral gyrus or the primary motor cortex. If you loop over here, you can see there's different body parts associated with different parts of that gyrus. So that's a pretty neat concept, and you can check out this figure in your book on page 85. Coming back just in general to the cerebral cortex, we're going to move on to what our text calls the binding problem. The binding problem is also known as the large-scale integration problem. The question associated with this problem is, how do we bind sensory information together? So in other words, how do we process different information to have a single experience in our mind? As our textbook indicates, the answer to this is not clear-cut. But what we do know is that we can have a single experience, and that will occur if we perceive two sensations happening at the same time and approximately the same place. The text gives us a couple of cool examples of how to sort of help this click in our minds. The first example they give is of a ventriloquist. A ventriloquist is someone who is talking without moving their mouth and moving the mouth of a doll so that we might perceive the doll is talking. And so we might perceive a doll is talking because we're perceiving that auditory sensation at the same time as seeing that doll's mouth move. Another example they give is of movies that are dubbed. So we might be hearing that someone is talking, but we can see on the screen that someone's mouth is moving differently than the words we're hearing. So that's another example of process or perceiving and understanding that those things are not happening at the same time. This is a neat little self-experiment that you can do on your own that's from the book that also illustrates this idea of binding. If you put your arm in front of a mirror and you're moving it and basically holding it so that it almost looks like the mirror is your other arm, what the text tells us is that if you keep clenching and unclenching your fist and looking at this other arm in the mirror, after a couple of minutes, you may start to experience the hand in the mirror as being your own left hand, even though it's not your left hand. So if you have the time, check it out. It's kind of a neat little self-experiment you can do to demonstrate this concept of binding. I hope you enjoyed this video. And again, if you have any questions, let us know, and hope you have a great rest of your day.